So again, Laura, we just thank you for coming this evening and giving us a background on your uh, collective communities here and the information that you're going to provide. So again, just give us a little background and tell us a little bit more about you and what you are acting on this evening.
Of course. Thank you for having me. And when you get a chance, you can grant me screen sharing privileges so I can share my slide deck in the next few minutes.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Laura Burgos. I am the first executive director of the Wilmington Learning Collaborative. Just some background on the collaborative and how I came into this space. This is Governor John Carney's initiative, a really thoughtful effort to streamline supports across our City of Wilmington schools. We have 9 schools participating in the collaborative. 4 of them are Red Clay schools, 4 of them are Christina School District schools, and 1 Brandywine schools. I'll quickly go through the names of the schools. So from Brandywine, we have Harlan Elementary. From Christina, we have the Bayard School, the Bancroft School, and then our 2 early education centers, Pulaski and Stubbs. And then from the Red Clay Consolidated School District, we have Warner Elementary, Johnston Elementary, Shortledge, as well as the Lewis Elementary, which is our dual language school. This is really a historical move to create a cross-district effort where we're sharing resources, sharing learnings, and through collective work, accelerating student achievement. The 9 schools historically have been I mean, you can go through the entire history in Wilmington of everything that has transpired from the Neighborhood Schools Act to the Wilmington Education Improvement Commission. Really, those past efforts have led to where we are right now, where we have very segregated schools, we have very segregated communities, and we have students who, for the most part, do not always attend schools in their neighborhoods. So many of our students are bused in many different directions. What we do have is a cluster of schools who are all just within minutes of each other,
Mhm.
but who all belong to different districts, which means different expectations, different curriculums, different schedules. So this effort was meant to create consistent teaching and learning systems across the 9 schools, consistent support, empowering teacher voice, empowering school leaders. We have a number of efforts, and I'll talk a little bit about our educator leader teams and our forthcoming community councils to make sure our schools are working together and not in silos. The goal was also to increase autonomy at the school level. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, tell you a little bit about myself. I jumped into the collaborative. Now let me tell you how I arrived here. So I'm a career educator. I started as a second grade teacher back in 2001 within New York City Public Schools, which is home for me. What began as a few years of teaching, or what I thought would be a few years of teaching, as I entered the profession through an alternative certification pathway, really became this amazing journey. That lent itself to school leadership, being on the founding team of a charter school, and then working with school systems across the country, really focused on change management, district action plans, principal 90-day plans. When I heard about the collaborative, I'm trying to share my screen. I'm not able to. Looks like you're sharing your screen.
I'm trying to, yeah.
Okay.
I apologize.
So I'll continue on. I heard about the collaborative back in 2021, and I was very interested in this idea of 3 school systems working together because that is not typical, and I hadn't seen it done well. I didn't feel that there was an existing framework throughout this country that showed how districts could actually collaborate and learn from one another. So I was very much intrigued. When I dug a little deeper and to better understand the nuances of each school, of each district, it was something I certainly knew I wanted to be a part of. The MOU between the Wilmington Learning Collaborative, which is its own entity, we are a nonprofit, and the three school districts was eventually executed back in November 2022, and that's when we were established as a nonprofit. And things moved slowly. Eventually, a council came together, and our council currently consists of the three superintendents, their three respective board members, parent representatives, and other a mayoral appointee and other community members. So that council came together early 2023. And one of their first charges was not only deciding how they would work together, but also identifying the executive director. So I was identified back in June. I officially assumed the role in August. Delaware State University is our trusted partner in this work. And if you look at some other comparable models across the country, for example, the Leadership Academy Network in Fort Worth, Texas, you see the uniqueness of having a university partnership. In our case, it provides us access to a number of teacher preparation resources. So we're very excited to also leverage that partnership to develop our teacher pipeline. I still can't share my screen. If you go down to,
I was gonna ask Roger, because I know you've been through this too. I mean, I got share screen.
Well, did you stop sharing?
yes,
I stopped
Did you-
mine, but
Did you make her co-host?
that's what I gotta do
yeah,
next.
I think if you do that, then I'll be able to share.
Yeah, so go to list of participants and then make her co-host.
I go to participants
I think so.
and then just invite.
You should be able to click next to my name, and there should be a drop down that allows you to make me co-host.
Here it comes. Hold on.
And then I'll get an alert saying that I am
Right.
now co-host, and that should allow me to share my screen.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, looks like we are good. Thank
business.
you.
Hey,
Okay. Let me fast forward through a few items. So, overview of what I think I'll talk about tonight, and hopefully this will be more conversational once I get through some of the big action items. I want to talk a little bit about what I've been able to accomplish in the past 6 months, and how it really sets us up for next year. This is a planning year where I'm working closely with the three districts. Next year, the Wilmington Learning Collaborative will have more oversight and authority over the 9 schools, and that will be a big transition. So I'd like to talk a little bit about some of those structures, or teaching and learning analysis, what's coming ahead in the next couple of months, and what we're defining as our big shifts for 2024, 2025. This is a little bit about me. This is, I think, my 23rd year in education. Started as a New York City teaching fellow, served as a principal. I've been fortunate to have this amazing journey across both traditional public, charter, and nonprofit organizations, really focused on systemic change. What I've learned over the years is oftentimes we address symptoms, but we don't get to the root causes, right? So, for example, I always use the analogy of the food pantry. We can create the food pantry, we can make sure families have access, we can create a larger food pantry, continue providing food resources to communities, but that does not address the root cause of what's causing food insecurity. And the same thing applies to education. until we examine systems across districts, across state agencies, we're going to continue, addressing symptoms rather than root causes. So that's really been my charge of understanding the problem. What is causing current levels of student achievement? What is causing, the current level of teacher attrition that we have? One of the big projects we kicked off when I came on board was what we call the ELT Innovation Projects. And what ELT stands for is Educator Leader Teams. So each of the 9 schools has a team of educators who really serve as an advisory body, a decision-making council that can really think about what are the needs of the school, what do we need to change in order to better meet the needs of our students and educators. When I came on board, these ELTs were in place, and I thought, what better way to kind of challenge their purpose by creating an opportunity for them to design a project that would be fully funded and supported by the WLC. So what we did is we ran initially, we said we would run 3 cycles. We asked each team to think about a current outcome, whether it's a literacy outcome, math outcome, attendance outcome, that they would like to change by addressing through a new project or initiative. We asked quite a few questions. We wanted them to think thoughtfully about what already has been tried, what has worked, what hasn't, and what they have learned. We asked them to provide an idea of how they would implement this idea, what budgetary resources would be needed. So we asked them to put together a budget, and then how they would monitor progress. So it's been an amazing journey. On the slide, you see a snapshot of our very first cycle, which that cycle launched on January 15th. So every school approached it differently, and we're talking about all early learning, elementary and middle schools. There are currently no high schools in our Wilmington Learning Collaborative, but you'll see how each team approached it differently. I'll give you 2 or 3 examples. So one of our early learning, early education centers said, you know what, we could really redesign this hallway and make it something that supports student transition. So something that they're designing are not only sensory classrooms, but sensory hallways. Another school thought about better ways to track student mathematics progress by bringing in new tools and technologies. So the purpose of this was to really activate educator voice and show that the right decisions, brilliance can really come from those who are closest to teaching and learning. And we want to continue to activate teacher voice and to provide spaces for teachers to think creatively around student needs. The other big accomplishment, and this is significant, when I came in, I really needed baseline data. I had the state assessment results, I had access to different pieces of data, but I needed to understand this bigger question of, are we providing our students, with equitable learning opportunities? I wanted to do a deep dive into our teaching and learning systems, and I wanted this to be done by an external independent partner. So what I did is I brought in the New Teacher Project, and they're an education nonprofit that has worked with some of our systems throughout the state of Delaware. And what they did is they came into each of our schools. They spent a day looking at instruction, examining student work samples. They sat down with focus groups made up of teachers, school leaders. They gathered a number of data points, including parent and student surveys. And all of this was tied to research that they've done in the past. And this is a great report I'd love to share with you, called the Opportunity Myth. This is research they've done over the years that has led them to understand that most students, our students in our schools, or students, throughout the country, spend most of their time in schools without access to 4 key resources. And those 4 resources, as you can see, are grade appropriate assignments, strong instruction, deep engagement, and teachers who hold high expectations. So the goal of completing this analysis was to really create I guess, ascertain a set of benchmark measures around where the 9 schools are currently in these 4 areas. Are WLC students being provided with grade appropriate assignments? Is there evidence of strong instruction? Do our teachers hold high expectations for students? And we learned quite a few interesting things. I do want to lift up that this was significant even to complete this process. Not only is it very lengthy and requires, partnership across our schools, but this was the first time we conducted any analysis across the 3 school districts using the same lens. So this was a big deal. We recently received our first round of reports. A few weeks ago, we received individual school reports. These reports I am not sharing publicly because I want each school to use them as a learning tool. At the end of this month, we will receive a WLC level report that really summarizes the trends and findings for all 9 schools and includes an equity analysis. That report I will be sharing publicly. For now, I'll share a few key takeaways without identifying any of the schools. And I think it'll, be helpful to kind of help you understand the current context. One of the big findings from this process was the percentage of classes who had adults with high expectations for student success. If you look at this chart, again, I did not name the schools, I simply numbered them in random order. But you'll see that there's a huge opportunity here to increase the expectations we have for our students. The WLC leads with the belief that all students can learn at high levels. All students are capable of achieving. So as you can see, this scale goes from 0 to 25. I don't have to say much more that we have significant work to do across our schools and shifting adult mindsets in believing that all students are capable of high achievement. The other key finding was the percentage of time that students are spending with grade appropriate assignments. And I think you see the connection. If an adult doesn't feel a student can achieve at high levels, oftentimes they might not give them very demanding tasks. So you see here, we have room to grow. Ideally, everyone should be at 100, and we see that there's variability across our schools in terms of providing students with grade level assignments. So I'll share those 2 takeaways, and I'm sure we'll have a discussion afterwards. I'm going to keep moving along. Another takeaway that we gathered from this teaching and learning analysis was, despite what you see in terms of the data in front of you, when it came to surveying our families about their satisfaction with the school experience for their children, many of our families were in fact highly satisfied. So that provides an opportunity for us to have some deep conversations. What is the communication like between our schools and our families when it comes to discussing student reading and math levels, student performance, student needs? Are those conversations happening? And what can we do to strengthen that bond between schools and families to make sure that, there's an accurate perception of what the student experience is? This leads me to our next charge, which is our site-based community councils. And those of you who are able to attend next Tuesday's WLC council meeting, which will take place on March 19th at 6 p.m., both at Shortledge Elementary and then virtually through Zoom. You'll hear us discussing our community council's launch in partnership with a local nonprofit. What we want to do here is really expand this idea of family engagement. It's one thing to have a series of family events, dinners, literacy nights, carnivals. That's one piece of engaging families. But we want to deepen that and truly create a decision-making advisory body of families and community partners that will really drive school decisions. So the way I'm breaking this down as we think about this multi-year effort is first and foremost, conducting a deep asset map of what currently exists, right? So doing that critical asset mapping across our 9 schools. Who are some of our community partners? What needs are they serving? What current student and family needs are not being served? And who may we be able to bring to the table to serve those needs? So that's phase 1. Phase 2, of course, is establishing, as we establish these 9 councils across each school, how do we then bring those 9 groups together to break down these silos that exist between schools and communities? And then finally, phase 3, we want to be able to measure our efforts. Data capturing is a big challenge when it comes to family engagement, when it comes to some of our community-based organizations. We want to change that by really deepening our understanding of what metrics do we expect to change by deepening our family engagement strategy. So as you can see, from April to December, phase 1 will entail these specific charges. So 1, creating a family-driven engagement strategy that will come from the 9 councils. So there will be a family engagement strategy developed at each school, given the unique needs of each of our 9 schools. Again, looking at our partnership landscape, what does that entail? And then identifying the needs of identifying current underserved needs and identifying where we may provide additional support. As you know, summer is around the corner. Each of our 9 schools have been busy working with their district leaders to design and provide summer opportunities for all of our learners. The WLC is currently supporting 3 programs. One is a high dosage tutoring model, which we are deepening in a cluster of our schools, especially our early education centers. And this is a 1-to-1 and 2-to-1 tutoring model several times a week to make sure that we continue to build those literacy skills over the summer. Another program in partnership with the Walnut Street YMCA, we're looking to pilot a new evidence-based curriculum in the mornings, supported by more experiential learning in the afternoons. And this program will take place at our school sites. And then finally, we are working with a group of local nonprofit organizations, the Smart Summer Program. This is a science and arts infused program held at the Cab Calloway School of the Arts, where we will be transporting WLC students to CAB to engage in deep project-based learning. So we're excited to measure the outcomes of each of these programs, what our students learning, how does this lend itself to literacy and math outcomes as we track those students throughout the academic year. What to expect in the next few months? Well, right now, as we wrap up March, we're looking forward to getting those final opportunity scorecard reports. I mentioned that we would be sharing publicly the WLC report. I didn't mention that we will also be receiving district level reports. Again, so many sources of data allowing us to look at schools, across districts, and then to really examine ourselves as a collaborative. Next month, April, and I'll share more about this towards the end, we have our first community convening. We're bringing together our families, educators, everyone affiliated with our WLC schools to talk about next year and what we feel the major commitments need to be and get some community reactions. This will take place at the Delaware Contemporary. We will be serving a full dinner, really sitting down, having some candid conversations. Also during April, during our monthly council meeting, we will deliver a very vivid report of the current state of the WLC, where we currently are, and that will be directly related to that overarching opportunity scorecard report. May, based on the feedback we get in April during our community convening, we'll be able to share publicly what our action commitments are for next year, as well as our summer professional learning plan for educators and school leaders. And then finally in June, as we wrap up the school year, thinking ahead to next year, how we will hold ourselves accountable as a collaborative of 9 schools. So that's a little bit of what's happening. Again, this has been a planning year. We've had the advantage of having a full academic year to truly plan. While we have moved a few projects forward, much of this year has been spent digging deep into each of our 9 schools, better understanding the needs, the data, the unique identity of each of our school partners. So I talked about next year. As a WLC, we have agreed to the following 3 big shifts. And the reason why I'm calling them big shifts and not priorities is because each of these require significant changes, significant shifts in mindset and practice. So our first big shift is we're framing as students first. I mean, that underscores everything. Right now, I can honestly say that in many cases, we are not putting students first. I can tell, I can share many examples of how we tend to prioritize adult comfort over student learning. And we want to shift that mindset and make sure that every decision we're making is for the betterment of our young learners. The second big shift is connected schools. As you can imagine, when you have schools that are, spread across the city, but part of different district umbrellas, there are a lot of silos. When I first brought our 9 principals together back in October, this was their first time. It was the first time for many meeting each other, learning about each other's schools. And remember, these are all schools that are all within the city limits of Wilmington, so close in proximity, but so different in many ways. So our goal is to create collaborative structures. I mentioned the community councils, the educator leader teams. We want to make sure that we build bridges across schools. So we're sharing great knowledge, best practices. We're modeling. Currently, as we meet with principals each month, I meet our group of principals at a different school so that we're able to visit classrooms, talk about instruction, and share learnings. And that's the community of practice and culture that I'm trying to build across our school partners. And then finally, the third big shift, purposeful partnerships. We want to make sure that we're partnering with intention, right? Everyone, of course, is reaching out to me, asking to work with our schools, and I'm really looking for evidence of success, right? Before we determine who to partner with, we need to really understand what's our need and how does this partner serve that need, and how are we going to measure success for our students and families. We also want to deepen our engagement. We have a lot of amazing partners working with our school communities. We want to make sure we're planning long term. So as we explore new partnerships, we want to make sure we're investing in multi-year engagements. That being said, you may have seen this flyer around, and I'll be sure to share a digital copy with you following this session. On April 3rd, we'll have our very first WLC community convening. We're calling it Connected Communities, a WLC dinner and design experience. We're trying to set a new bar for how we bring schools together, how we bring families together. We don't have to be crammed up in a school auditorium or in a gym, listening and trying to hear over each other. We can sit down, share a meal, share ideas, and truly explore some of our city's, amazing resources. So in this case, we'll be meeting at the Delaware Contemporary. We'll have some time to do a walkthrough of the exhibit, and we'll really have a chance for our families and school partners and educators and students to lend voice to our charge for next year. I will stop there. I can, of course, go on and on. I'm sure you have many questions. I thought that this would be even more powerful if we engage in conversation. So I welcome your questions, thoughts, and feedback.
Great. Well, thank you, Laura, for that background. I'm amazed with the planning that you've put together and projections that you're looking forward to as far as implementing a number of these strategies that you've built. So it's very impressive. And I guess, there's a number of things that come to mind. Obviously, the student needs, as you pointed out, and some of the issues that, each of these families, might have problems with, as far as being available to help educate the children past school hours and things like that. I was just wondering, what would be outsiders like us who can help volunteer? Because we have a number of schools that we support via our church. And we do mentoring, we do teaching from time to time. So we're probably helping some of the schools that you're already including in your 9 organizations. But what do you think would be kind of the most appropriate or meaningful opportunity for volunteers to help?
Oh gosh, endless opportunities as we think about, and I'm particularly, thinking about the family engagement piece. So even the event we're having on April 3rd, we want to have more of those events, right? As you can imagine, it requires a lot of planning, facilitation support, getting the word out. We're a small nonprofit. I hired 2 team members. One is a director of operations to make sure that we're being responsible stewards of public funds and make sure we have an infrastructure that supports how we communicate with schools and manage contracts. The other position I hired is a director of educator pathways. As you can imagine, we have many teachers across our buildings that are not certified. And what I saw when when I started visiting schools in September, it became very obvious to me that many of our teachers, whether they're substitutes, whether they're paraprofessionals and not certified teachers, they've been in our schools for years, many times coming in and filling in the gap when we can't find a certified teacher and finishing out the year. But what I didn't see was a true investment in their, upward mobility. So our director of educator pathways is actually on the ground, meeting educator by educator and getting an understanding of what the barriers are. If the barrier is, for example, passing the teacher exam, we're going to get you coaching support. We're going to pay for the exam for you. If the barrier is you need to complete some coursework, but you have a family in the evening and you can't complete your coursework, we're going to pay for childcare. A lot of the solutions are very obvious, right? It's simply about removing barriers. But in order to remove barriers, you have to have those direct conversations and you have to be in the schools. Many well-intentioned programs are out there, our university programs, our state education programs. They're amazing resources and scholarship supports. It can be very overwhelming to navigate those systems. So our team is kind of leading that charge of connecting individuals to that. So I would to those pathways. So I would say, I'll have to give it some thought because every school has unique needs. I think working directly with our council, thinking about how we can support our council's efforts. Getting the message out there. This should be a charge. The WLC should be a charge that the whole city rallies behind, right? And I think that's the piece I'm always looking for support for. How do we get everyone to be interested in education, right? The strength of our local public schools, will determine who our future leaders are, who will lead our industries, who will lead our local economy. So I think getting folks to think about that it begins with how we're serving our pre-K to 12 students. It should be something on everyone's mind, whether you have a school-age child or not. It's part of the fabric of the city of Wilmington and the state of Delaware. So I mean, just that advocacy is something we're always needing support with, and connecting us throughout the community. There are still a number of entities I haven't had conversations with, so I was excited when I received the invite for this, because again, this is another active subgroup within the city that I wasn't connected to. So building those bridges, connecting me to other groups that are equity focused and justice oriented.
Great, thank you.
Hmm.
Roger, Sandy, Pam, any questions?
Laura, you had a couple of there were a couple of bar charts there talking about the grade appropriate teaching, I guess, and also the expectations of teachers. But there were two other items on there, and I wondered what were the other two then, and what was the the grade across the schools? What was the experience across the 9 schools, those other two?
Pretty comparable. We're still doing some analysis across the 9 schools. Um, the I would have to look at the reports, but it's all relative, kind of that strong instruction. We did see lots of evidence of strong instruction. We did see evidence of deep engagement. I shared the two that I thought we had the greatest opportunity to change, because you can have deep engagement, doesn't mean that students are deeply engaged with the grade appropriate material. You can have strong instruction, doesn't always mean that the standard you're teaching is aligned with with the students that you are serving.
So when you say grade appropriate, does that mean where they are, or where the state says you should be at the
I'll give you an example. One day I was visiting a 6th grade classroom, and I walked in, and I was getting a sense of what the students were working on. And one young man was working on a worksheet. The worksheet had a list of sentences that were missing punctuation. And his job, the task, was for him to add the missing punctuation. And I immediately thought, well, as a 2nd grade teacher, that is something I would have, maybe given to a 1st or 2nd grade class. Clearly not a 6th grade student, right? So making those connections, and making sure that we're having very high expectations of students, and then filling the gaps as needed, but leading with that thought that all students are capable of learning at high levels.
And one of these Lewis was a dual language school, did you say?
Yes.
Yeah, we were in Lewis, right, Sandy?
Yeah, we have 3 children who are in their 30s, and when we moved here, they were still in state busing. So our children went to Lewis School for their elementary, for 1st through 3rd grade. And so that, I was involved in that PTA, and it was, I thought it was a great experience for them, aside from being on the bus for a long time. But then some of the kids, then the children that lived in the city were then bused for 3-year segments. And they had such long bus rides all of that time in their education. And so it was kind of difficult for them to be their school was so far away from where they lived. So that was just, some of the problems, but I felt it was really valuable for my kids to, we live in the suburbs, we live in Hockessin, and so they got to meet people and make friends that they might not have made otherwise.
Yeah, I think it was so valuable, and I know it didn't hold up. People didn't like the busing idea, and a lot of groups, didn't matter where those groups were, didn't like the busing, but the mixing was tremendous and really needed. So, and because then, of course, then as you say, you and I were, well, you more were available and active in the PTA. So it's hard,
You mentioned, something else I didn't mention that is something that is a priority for the Wilmington Learning Collaborative is leading the design work around Wilmington High School. So if you, and I'll send you a copy of our MOU, you'll see that one of the charges for the future is serving as being part of that planning team to reimagine what a Wilmington High School could be. When our 8th graders leave our City of Wilmington schools, they go in every direction to a number of high schools outside of the city. So lots of conversation to come around that and how we may play a role in, in bringing a high school to the city. So lots of different opinions, lots of energy around what this could mean, but definitely more to come.
Well, I find that a hopeful thought because I live in the city. In fact, I live on the street leading up to the front of Harlan Elementary School. So I'm in the Brandywine district, and that school is right there. And I've never really been in the school except as to vote, but it's a polling place sometimes. But it just seems to me that, first of all, I know there's nothing you can do about this. It's ridiculous for the city of Wilmington to be divided among 4 school districts to start with. And so I'm glad to hear about this collaborative and bringing together these people from these schools to be able to create something that is cohesive and really looks toward what is best for the students. And so I really support this whole concept, which is kind of why I tuned in tonight to see what this was all about, because I have a real concern about literacy, especially, and kids just aren't learning enough, and they're not learning early enough to read properly, up to grade level by, say, 3rd grade, and it's a really downward slide after that for many kids. So having the right instruction for those kids in a comprehensive way in the city, I think would go a long way to helping them achieve all of their goals. And I wondered, a question I had, and there's probably nothing you can really say about this, but well, my opinion would be that we have so many private schools in this area and parochial schools, and the city schools especially, I think, do not have the reputation of being great schools. And so I think a lot of people, if they can afford to, put their kids in a parochial or private school. And I think if the public schools could become more, including, the charter schools, I'm ambivalent about the appropriateness of charter schools to start with. So I'm fully in support of public education. And I think charter schools and private schools, even though I taught in a private school for a long time, I feel like really public school is where we all have an opportunity to be part of an institution, because schooling is what we all have in common as humans in our country. There's school, and we go to school. And for educators and parents and children to be together and working together, I think is crucial. And I think if the Wilmington schools were better, fewer people would seek to go elsewhere, and you might have greater diversity in the schools. As it stands now, there's very little diversity in the city of Wilmington as well. I can only speak for Harlan Elementary School, but well, and for Warner, because I did some mentoring there. So I don't know, do you get the sense that there's any resentment among school, either teachers or administrators, about all the private schools that sort of suck up a lot of students?
I think the charge of the WLC is to change that narrative and restore a sense of school pride, of community pride. Now we know this is much bigger than education. We have to look at historically from desegregation efforts to housing policy. I mean, it's beyond education. But I see nothing but opportunity to really change the narrative to where attending a WLC school is a source of pride, right? This is not an effort that's punitive. You know, there were many questions in the beginning. Well, why am I a WLC school? Is that, and it's not. This is, many different stakeholders recognizing that we have a lot of variability across the 9 schools. If we would work together and bring the 3 school systems together, I mean, we could truly do amazing things. Each Friday afternoon, I spend my Fridays, I close out my week meeting with the 3 superintendents. And we actually, sit in a room and problem solve and share strategies and insights. And certainly not to pat myself on the back, but before the WLC, this wasn't happening as often. So the fact that, all 3 system leaders have found a way to protect their time and carve out this safe space to talk about each other's schools is not something that you see in many places across the country. So I am very hopeful for what's to come the next couple of years. I think the end goal is to create this transformative effort that redefines what City of Wilmington public schools look like, and to really pilot a number of new solutions that other schools and districts can learn from. It would be amazing if this could become like a true innovation hub where we're testing out new ways to engage families, we're learning, we're sharing those learnings, and now we're supporting other schools and districts throughout the state. This is going to be a long journey, right? It didn't take us a few years to get here. It took many years, for us to get to a place where we see we need rapid improvement, right? Not 1 or 2 percentage point gains each year. We need dramatic changes, and it's going to take an enormous effort, not just the WLC, not just the Reading Consortium, but everyone working together and the whole city rallying behind this and investing in this.
I had two issues I wanted to mention. One is when you have 3 different districts, then you have the possibility of referendums that may fail or pass. And Roger and I have always been very animated when a referendum would come up and trying to get everybody to vote yes, because we would always say these are our future leaders, and whether or not you're retired and whether or not you have other issues, we need to support these kids. And I don't know if one of the districts doesn't pass the referendum, that could be really difficult for keeping things up where you want them to be. I think Christiana just passed one. Is that correct?
So we've been very fortunate, and I live in the Red Clay district, and both Red Clay and Brandywine passed their referendums.
Oh, we
recently.
live in Red Clay too, so we were pleased about that.
We were very happy. I have a young child. We're a household of educators. So we were both very excited. And I mean, you want it to pass by 100%. And I think, to your earlier question around how can we help, it's in movements such as those, right? Kind of educating the masses on why this is critical. We as a Wilmington Learning Collaborative, I was holding tight, and thinking, well, if one of the referendums don't pass,
Right.
this changes, this impacts my budget planning for next year, because we need to be positioned and ready to fill some of those voids, right? Whether it means after school funding, summer funding, teacher support. So it was something we were watching very closely, and we were very fortunate to have the public support for 2 out of 3 districts. The third did not push for a referendum, did not have a referendum this year.
Oh, okay. And the other thing I was going to mention, we have 3 grandchildren that live in Hocuss, and they all go or will go to Odyssey Charter. because the oldest child got in, and they chose to try and go there because their father is Greek and it's a Greek immersion a school, and they both are in the immersion program. But I will say that the student population there is such a great mixture of I'm sure there are some people from this, some children from the city of Wilmington that go there, and then we just had a recent presentation from East Side Charter, and so those are both schools that probably include children from the city of Wilmington. And so I wondered, will there be any point when you maybe can branch out with what these schools are doing and how they're doing? I know, right, 9 schools is plenty for now, but and I don't know how many other charter schools there are.
So I have visited some of the charters. Part of our mission as a WLC is to not only serve students in the 9 WLC schools, but to make sure we provide opportunities to support all schools within the city of Wilmington. We work closely with the Reading Consortium that is led by Senator Lockman, which encompasses not only WLC schools, but a number of our charter partners. So as we plan for next year and we think about expanded learning time programs after school, when we think about training supports, we want to make sure that we're inviting schools to participate that are outside of the WLC schools, because we want to make sure we live up to that goal of providing resources to all students who live in the city of Wilmington, and not all students living in the city attend our 9 schools. So I see much, I mean, there's much appetite and much opportunity for us to more formally partner with local charter schools
Okay,
and private schools.
that's great news. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else with any other comments? Okay. Well, Laura, certainly, as I mentioned earlier, the presentation was very informative. I think there's a strategy that seems to be moving forward that can really benefit, not only these 9 schools, but Wilmington schools in general. And, we appreciate your time. And if you, I'm not sure I gave you my email because Sue Linderman's away, but I'll make sure that you write that down.
And I'll make sure you have copies of different resources, not only the flyer for the upcoming event, but knowing how to access our website that's under construction. Soon you'll start seeing us more visible. We just finished up our logo design. Our website launches in May. So it's been a busy 6 months, starting from scratch, almost like a small business in startup mode.
Sure.
When you enter this role, there's no blueprint, right? There's no employee training or onboarding. It was me physically hitting the streets, talking to different communities, walking into schools, identifying leaders. So, I mean, it was really starting from scratch. And I don't think I would have had it any other way, because it really allowed me to have a certain level of depth of understanding, even though it's only been about 6 or 7 months. So I'll send you as much as I can. I'll add you, if you send me a list of emails for the working group members, I can add you, to our listserv, so you get updates as we start ramping up for next year.
Great. Yeah, that's absolutely something we'll look forward to. And as I mentioned, beyond just the people at church, we have a number of connections with some of these schools, and I think there's parents who, aren't necessarily tuned into all these things, but I think there's some opportunities down the road as you get more together that I think there's opportunities to actually generate some opportunities to generate revenue to distribute amongst, these districts.
Yeah, I mean, that's something else on our on the horizon right now. Of course, we've been very fortunate to have the governor allocate an additional 10 million for next year. And we want to make sure that over time we start attracting other, streams of funding. So it's going to be a long journey. So I'm excited to capture it all in a book one day.
in your spare time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your presentation and for all the hard work you're doing. It's
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you.
such
Thank
an important
you.
project.
Accomplished
You
a
have-
lot already.
Well, I look
Lauren,
forward to meeting you all in person and connecting with you in person at future events. You have my email. I'll share my number and easy to reach. I'm always out there in the community. You'll run into me at some point.
Right.
I am very fortunate. My 3-year-old didn't burst in, so so now it's time to transition to bedtime prep. So
all right.
thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Thanks
Thank you
so
so much.
Thank you.
Have a great
Thanks.
night.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sandy, Pam, and
Thank you.
Roger. Appreciate
All
it.
right. Take care.
Bye.